Everyone, welcome, and Jean-Pierre, welcome.
Thank you.
Many of you were here last time for part one, but let me reintroduce Jean-Pierre as a fourth generation in his family in the hotel industry, beginning with his great-grandmother who opened a hotel in Lourdes in southwest France in 1914, just a month before the start of the First World War. And Jean-Pierre is from Lourdes, and I'll have you talk a bit more about yourself, or we'll talk a bit more about you in a moment. If you don't mind, Jean-Pierre, I'd like to show you a little video that I made.
Go ahead.
Jean-Pierre, see if you can guess where I am. Macaron.
Votre coupe de champagne est en route, Monsieur Kraut. Your glass of champagne, it's on its way, Mr. Kraut.
Merci, monsieur. That's Jean-Pierre Soutric. He thinks he knows everything about luxury hotels in Paris. I wonder if he can tell where I am today. Hey, Jean-Pierre, where am I?
Very easy. We are at the Four Seasons Hotel Georges V in Paris.
Jean-Pierre, what are you doing here?
Don't we have an appointment?
For what?
Well, today we're launching our episode 2 of Luxury Hotels of France.
Oh, right, here. Let's have a seat. Let's talk about it.
Thank you.
Have a macaron or some fruit.
Merci beaucoup.
Champagne's coming.
I hope so.
Oh, Jean-Pierre, we're such good actors.
Indeed. Indeed, we are.
We have to find a producer. We could do a whole show about this. We'll go to all these hotels. You'll interview the directors and the decorators, and I'll interview the concierge and the bartenders.
All right, that's a deal.
Is that good? Okay.
I'd rather go for the travel advisors. They're my most favorite crowd.
Jean-Pierre, tell me, well, first, I will have to thank the hotel, the Four Seasons Hotel Georges V in Paris for allowing us to film in one of their suites. But you can tell us why they were so nice to us, or actually they were so nice to you, and I just happened to be tagging along.
Yeah.
So
I feel it's my second home, isn't it?
Yeah, so tell us a bit about your background, what you're getting involved in the hotel industry. How did you start out?
Well, very quickly after university and the army, because at that time in France you had to go through the military service, I decided to move back to the hotel industry, which was very much in my DNA. My great-grandmother, as you said very rightly, opened up her first hotel just almost a few hours before the war broke up in 1914. I was very fortunate because I didn't spend much time with very different companies. I spent 20 years of my life with the Four Seasons Georges V and the company. I started when I started with them, I was 35 years old, and I left them when I was 55 years old, which was probably a very difficult decision to take. But as you know, in life, sometimes you have to move on. But for me, I have never left a company like I did with Four Seasons. And the Georges V will remain forever and ever and ever the hotel of my heart. And that's the reason why I can still come in with a friend of mine to come and shoot a stupid video. But it's a stunning place. We all thought of you, all of you on this screen today, and we all wish we could spend some time and have a glass of champagne together.
Yeah,
but it's going to come in soon.
Well, we did get to share a macaroon, so that was nice.
Keep date.
Yeah. And now you're doing lots of different things, including consulting for luxury hotels.
And this week in Brittany.
That's why you're in a hotel room in Rennes in Brittany, because you're doing some work there. There we go. I'll start, Jean-Pierre, just to situate us on the map. This is a map from 1900, and our last talk ended in 1909. So we covered hotels, creation of luxury hotels from 1855 to 1909. And there's a reason that we chose 1909 to stop, because after that, hotels are being created beyond the initial area of the creation hotels. The first luxury hotels are near the Louvre. From here, if you can see my arrow, it's a triangle from here to the Opera to the Crillon, which is at Plaza Concorde. So after 1909, hotels are going to be created elsewhere, including on the one that we're going to talk about first, on the left bank. But 1909, Jean-Pierre, maybe you could tell us a major event that took place in 1909.
Actually, it was 1910, January
1910.
1910.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, the beginning of the year in Paris was actually coinciding with the worst Seine flooding. For 10 days, half of Paris, 50% of the city will be under waters. And if you walk around the Seine River today, you will see on the walls the mark of the 1910 flooding. It was incredible. But that year was probably getting towards the end of the Belle Epoque that we evoked the last time, because 4 years after.
But wait, before 4 years after, sorry, I'm missing my script here. Because just to say something about the flood, this is an image from the flood of 1924, and it's a tradition in Paris to say that the Seine is flooding when the foot of this statue called the Zouave is covered by water. So this is 1924, which was another flood. And if you can see further here, this is a picture that I took just the other day of the Zouave. The bridge has changed, but the Zouave is still standing, and his feet are dry, meaning that there's no flooding going on now. And so the Zouave is this image of an infantryman from the mostly from Algeria, recruits from Algeria during the colonial period. So that's my segue to talking about war, Jean-Pierre.
Fabulous. Although fabulous is not the right word. 1914, Europe is about to go at war. And it was probably a period of time where nothing can be really described about luxury hotels in Paris. But the reason why I mentioned 1914 is because for the first time, and the last time, the Europeans will probably decide not to find a moment to live in peace. And there will be another one in 20 years after. So a lot of things that I described during my presentation today and the way I did it last time also was very much related to these wars. And in 1918, thank God, after 4 years of the most probably awful bloodshed, there will be the peace. And Gary will talk about how the Americans came on board finally in 1917 to help us finish this war. But just before that, this is where we're moving.
Yeah.
Just before that.
So wait, let me just say that we called this talk from the roaring 1920s to the vaccinated 2020s, but actually it starts right before, but we're telling this, it was 1910 and we're telling another one 1913. But in fact, they really get going after the war.
Indeed.
Go ahead, Jean-Pierre.
But there is an exception today because the last time we decided to stop our description and our story of Paris at the end of the Belle Epoque. The First World War was very much the end of the Belle Epoque. The Lutetia was probably one of the last hotels to open. That was the first time a Palace Hotel will open on the left bank of the Seine River in Paris. And the Lutetia in 1910 was actually the first time a hotel that was bearing the name of Paris. Lutetia, as you probably know, is the Latin name for Paris, which means light. And that hotel was open just a few years before the First World War. What is very important to remember, this war was not only a war of terrible violence and cruelty, but that was a time where women start to take power across the world because their husbands, brothers, fathers, partners, lovers were in the trenches, and the women really took power. I took two of them here. Gabrielle Chanel, she's the one who's going to liberate women from these long dresses and this very difficult fashion that was not always the best way to be an active woman. And another one will be this young American woman born in St. Louis, Missouri. Her name was Josephine Baker. She came to Paris. She was very young, and she became very quickly a star on the music scene in Paris. So I just want to mention that because Josephine Baker is going to be a regular at the Hotel Lutetia where we are now. Another one, another American woman, this time totally different, from New York City, Gertrude Stein. Gertrude Stein was pictured in this movie, Midnight in Paris, that some of you may have seen. It's a Woody Allen pictures. It's quite well done. Gertrude Stein is not so well known even in America because she was a little bit forgotten. But she was a patron. She actually was a protector of some of the most famous painters in these years, to include Picasso and Matisse. And Gertrude Stein, there is still a plaque on the left bank of Paris, very close to the Hotel Lutetia, where she was a regular at the bar. But the reason why the Lutetia had become quite special in the hearts of the Parisians, as well as in the hearts of the people that are really in love with history. In 1945, you know, after the Russians and the Americans started to liberate the camps in Poland, in Germany, in the Czech Republic today, a lot of them managed to came back, not so many, unfortunately. Here is a picture of the buses that went to the Gare de l'Est in Paris to take the deported prisoners and the Jews that have been taken to hell by the Nazis. And the Hotel Lutetia will be the center, almost the shelter for a lot of them, for them to reunite with their family. Among them was a very famous young French lady. Her name was Simone Weil. You may have heard about her. She became in the 1970s one of the most popular ministers of France. She was a minister of health and working with the President Giscard d'Estaing at that time. Simone Weil, what really struck me when she was a bit older, she wrote her memoir, memories, and in her memories, the book is called Une vie, a life. She mentioned that she came back from Auschwitz because she was taken prisoner with her mom and her sister. Her mom, unfortunately, didn't make it. She passed away in Auschwitz, and she came back with her sister. The two of them were actually received at the Hotel Lutetia, and that was in May of 1945. And in September of the same year, barely 4 months later, she was registered at the university in Paris, and she started to go and to carry on with her education. I mean, I'm so impressed by that woman. She just passed away recently, 2 years ago, and she was taken to the Panthéon in Paris. And you've been to the Panthéon. The Panthéon in Paris is actually where the most famous French men and women are actually buried.
This, so the picture on the left is of Simone Weil during that time while she was in college. And the one on the right, actually, I just received it because it's the cover of the press kit for the, there's an exhibition at City Hall that opens next week. The press opening, I believe, is on Thursday. And then there's an exhibition for the next couple of months. I know that there aren't many of you who will be in Paris during this time, but it is worth going to City Hall to see this exhibition certainly if you know about her, but if you do not know about Simone Weil, to see the exhibition at City Hall.
It probably will be online also, Gary, isn't it? What I like to talk about at the left bank where the Lutetia is located is the cultural life of Paris. After the war, there will be an incredible renaissance of the cultural life in Paris. Not only the cafes and the restaurant will be packed again, like tomorrow for us in Paris, as we leave our confinement, our lockdown. Tomorrow, the terraces of Paris will be open again, and trust me, there will be a lot of people. So after the war, they felt the same feeling. They felt it's time to live, it's time to have a good time. And a lot of famous poets, writers, singers, musicians gathered in the cafes around the Lutetia or at the Lutetia itself. You probably recognize Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone Weil. Albert Camus, very well known in the USA because he was also a Nobel Prize of Literature. Somebody that you know because he's American, Miles Davis, who fell in love with Juliette Gréco in the 1950s. And they spent a lot of time together until they decided to separate it. But it was such a vibrant Paris. I missed that one. I didn't see it. I arrived too late.
You're still young, Jean-Pierre.
The Lutetia today, It's the irony of history. The Lutetia, and you remember the story of the deported and the Jewish people who came back from the camps. The Lutetia is owned today by an Israeli family, the Akirov. And I had the pleasure to meet with Georgie, and I think a few of the travel professionals during this session will remember Georgie Akirov. They took 4 years, and I cannot tell you exactly the amount of money they spent, probably something like 350 million US or euros to renovate the Lutetia. The facade has been painstakingly restored to its former glory. The style is called Art Nouveau. We're going to talk about the Art Deco in a few moments. But the Lutetia today is standing proud at the crossroad of Boulevard Raspail in one of the most beautiful neighborhood of Paris, Saint-Germain-des-Prés. The views from the top are really very romantic. I like the new hotel, the way they've done it. It was not easy, and there was a lot of criticism, as always, when you change things. The only thing that they didn't change was actually the views of the city of Paris. And the next one, which is Gary's most probably favorite place, Le Bar Joséphine, named after Josephine Baker.
Yes, except when I've been there, I haven't seen that woman flying by. It is a beautiful place, and actually we showed a picture of it was the dining room. Was that what it was before, or you know, at the beginning? I actually prefer more intimate hotel bars, I must say, and this one is very, very big. And I'll tell you a little story that actually precedes the renovation. When the bar was elsewhere, it was on the other side of the central alley. Central hall of the hotel, and the bartender there, who had been there for 25 years or so, and he's not there now. I had asked him to make me a cocktail, and I just told him more or less what I wanted, and he made one. And I asked what he called it, and he said, "This is called Gary's cocktail." So I felt very honored, and I have an article about it on France Revisited about having a cocktail named after me at the Lutetia.
Someday when you become very famous, Gary, they will probably add your last name, Gary Kraut.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, I'm sure there's lots of first named hotels, first named cocktails. So the Lutetia we were just talking about is here at Sèvres Babylone. But in fact, that's the only hotel that we'll be talking about today that is on the left bank. Everything else is on the right bank. In fact, the creations in the past 20 years, because there have been a number that you're going to hear about of major hotels that have a palace status in France, are over on the right bank. As I said earlier, our initial talk covered this triangle here, and both because of the density of this area of hotels already and because of the expansion of luxury in the city, beginning in the 1920s, well, beginning in 1913, actually, and then expanding furthermore in the 1920s, hotels are going to be created in this area with the Champs-Élysées at the center. We're in the 8th and the 16th arrondissement, and they're more or less between Parc Monceau here and Trocadéro. And everything that we're going to be talking about from now on is actually in that right bank area.
Exactly, because now we're moving all the way to the Avenue Montaigne. Avenue Montaigne is famous for one hotel, and a lot of you know what I'm going to talk about in a second. But it was famous first and foremost because of a young man who came from Normandy in the 1920s to create beautiful dresses. His name was Christian Dior. He came and established his first business, 30 Avenue Montaigne, and that business was actually in a small workshop in the attics. But what makes the Avenue Montaigne also very famous is the Plaza Athénée. And we are not in the 20s, we are on the verge of the war again in 1913. That was a few months before the war. But that hotel was already designed after almost what would become the Art Deco style. The Plaza Athénée is actually at number 25 Avenue Montaigne. Next to the Plaza Athénée is one of my favorite opera house in Paris. It's also a theater. It's called the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées. Why is it that I mentioned the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées? Because it really is part of the history of the Plaza Athénée, because on the very same year in 1913, and I think that's the next picture, Gary.
Is it?
I hope. A young composer, Igor Stravinsky, will shock Paris and Europe with the creation of the controversial Rite of Spring, le Sacre du Printemps. As you probably know, it was almost a small revolution. Most of the people on that night were dressed up in beautiful gowns for the ladies, in tucks for the men, and they were standing up and yelling and shouting and insulting Igor Stravinsky and the dancer for that performance, which was incredibly revolutionary adventure. So that's the reason why I always associate the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées and the Plaza Athénée, because they were next to each other. And I believe that Igor Stravinsky on that night had only one way to really escape that, is to find shelter at the Plaza Athénée. We're back to our friend Christian Dior. There was a little bit on a version in images. I just want to mention that Christian Dior, who actually made it today, if you pass by the Avenue Montaigne, and when you come back to Paris, you will see that from the 3 small workshops in the attics, Christian Dior has taken over the entire block at 30 Avenue Montaigne. He was the dressmaker for Ava Gardner, for Princess Grace. On her wedding day, she was wearing a Christian Dior beautiful gown. And she was also, he was also the dressmaker for Marlène Dietrich, who only had to cross the street because she used to live Avenue Montaigne until she passed away. As you probably know, she died in Paris and she was taken to the La Madeleine, and the Germans were a bit upset that the funeral of Marlène Dietrich took place in Paris instead of Berlin. In the 1930s, the Plaza Athénée will add the Relais Plaza. Nothing changed. The clients have changed, obviously, but the decor is exactly the same. And there is a beautiful Liberty glassware inside the restaurant. And this is where most of the people will go before the show or just after the opera. Today, the Plaza Athénée is owned by the Brunei family. It's actually been entirely restored. They took also the time during the COVID period to finish the renovation. It's a very classic hotel, extremely fancy, so to speak. But to me, it's quintessential Paris in its Louis XVI style. Last but not the least, we cannot escape this hotel without talking about one of Gary's famous hangout, le bar du Plaza Athénée, n'est-ce pas, Gary?
Well, not really, Jean-Pierre. I must say it's beautiful, and it's so, you know, Plaza Athénée has such a fashionista reputation to it that I feel that when I walk in, there are some places, hotels where I walk in and they look you straight in the eye and they say welcome. And here, when I walk in, they look at my shoes. They want to see what I'm wearing. And so I don't feel that I have the right shoes for the Plaza Athénée. So you know, I think I feel that I need like an 18-year-old 5'11" model on my elbow when I walk in. And since I don't have one, it's really not one of my hangouts. So I would love to. They can invite me anytime they want.
We need to go shopping, Gary.
I'll tell you another one that's associated with Christian Dior, which is just on a side street not too far from the Plaza Athénée off of Avenue Montaigne, and that is the Saint Régis. And the Saint Régis was opened in 1923, actually. It was opened just maybe a year or two after. But in 1923, André Terrail, and those of you who know French gastronomy will know that the Terrail family is the owner of the Tour d'Argent, the famous restaurant with a fabulous view of Notre Dame. And Terrail bought this in 1923 because he was already treating, you know, very luxurious guests, and especially a lot of English travelers and increasingly American were coming. So this is still, it's a boutique luxury hotel. It's the kind of place where you want to go. I mean, anyone can go, but I think if you want to go, you know, with your mistress or lover, and not be seen, because if you go to the Plaza Athénée, everyone's going to see you. So it's a little more discreet when you come here, but it's a beautiful, beautiful little hotel. And André Terrail is actually associated with another hotel, and I suppose it's Jean-Pierre's favorite that he can tell us about.
Indeed, indeed. Just very, very close to the Plaza Athénée, Avenue Montaigne and the Saint-Régis, on the beautiful Avenue Georges V, stands the Georges V. Well, that hotel is very special to my heart. As I mentioned to you, I spent 20 years there. And the Avenue Georges V was actually renamed after the King George V for his support during the First World War. And indeed, André Terrail was on this occasion associated with his American partner. His name was Joel Hillman, to create out of the blue this beautiful Art Deco hotel in Nantes, 1928. And at that time was a very first one. It was one of the first hotels with another two that we're going to speak about in a few moments to open up in this neighborhood of Paris. So in 1928, everything went well. The hotel is opening in grand style. It's very successful, very quickly successful. And at that time, and that's actually the next picture, Gary, the hotel would come to Le Havre in Normandy to pick up the customers.
Did I miss one?
No, that's okay. That's the next one. It's actually the next one after the facade.
Oh.
Yes, indeed. So in the 1920s, most of the luxury hotels in Paris, they used to go to Le Havre in Normandy to pick up the customers, because at that time they were not flying. They were taking these luxury liners all the way to Le Havre, between New York and Le Havre. This one is actually pictured on this slide is the famous Normandy. The Normandy was one of the most incredibly luxurious luxury liners between New York and Paris. It will carry on all the way to the declaration of World War II. Unfortunately, the ship, she will actually burn to ashes in the port of New York. It was not intentional. It was an accident, and the ship, the cruise ship, was still there during the war because the French liner decided to stop the service between New York and France because of the declaration of war. They were afraid that the German submarines would actually fire on the ship. So that was 1928, 1929. Everything goes well until the Black Thursday. And you all know what I'm talking about. The crisis, the New York Stock Exchange is falling apart. And this is a terrible time for everyone in the US, but not only. Very quickly after, in 1930, the crisis is hitting Europe, and the hotel, Georges V, is going bankrupt. As always in any stories, there is a savior. In this situation, there were two saviors. They are pictured right here. Le Prince Edmond de Polignac and his wife, the Princess Winarietta. Winarietta may ring a bell to you. I'm sure you heard about the Singer family. In the world, every single woman would have a Singer sewing machine, and so did my grandmother and my mom. So Winarietta was the heiress of the Singer family. She was married to the Prince Edmond de Polignac. Funny enough, both of them were not interested in each other because he was gay, and she was a famous lesbian. In the 1930s, trust me, it was something like a status. But the niece of Winarietta was very smart. She got the empire of the Polignac and the Singer, and she married a French banker, François Dupré. And she's the one who's going to take this hotel back into life. She's the one who's going to save the life of the Georges V. She will stay at the Georges V every single day of her life until 1968. During these years, the Hotel Georges V is going to play host to very famous guests. To the left-hand side is Marie de Roumanie. She was the granddaughter of Queen Victoria and the Queen of Romania. Why is it she is on picture here? Because she used to stay at the Georges V. That she played a very important role during the war, the First World War, and after that to help France to recover. She was very famous in Paris, and she would walk the streets of Paris and the parks of Paris, and the Parisians will gather around her because she was a very beautiful woman, and she was extremely popular for supporting the French during the war. Next to her is another famous lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, that you probably remember. She came to Paris on several occasions, staying at the Georges V because she was very much in charge of the signature and the declaration of Universal Declaration of Human Rights that will be signed in Paris after the Second World War. Just a few months before, Dwight Eisenhower, he was a general at that time, he was not the president yet. He arrived to Paris in August 1944, just after the D-Day in Normandy, and he established his headquarters at the Georges V before moving to Versailles and eventually further east, where he will establish his headquarters in Reims, in the Champagne region, where he will sign the peace on the Victory Day, May the 8th, 1945. Also very famous is Cary Grant, who came to Paris to play on this movie called Charade with the most beautiful actress, Audrey Hepburn, is pictured here on the roof of the Georges V. And in the 1960s, obviously, there was another story, another life. The pop music was invading the world. And naturally, the Beatles find the Georges V, named after an English king, home, the perfect home for them in Paris. They will pay several visits to the Georges V.
Jean-Pierre, I have a question for you first. So you know lots of celebrities, right? I mean, you meet them all. You meet them all the time. How does it work with these hotels? Do they just, do they just have your phone number and call you up and say, does Celine Dion in her day when you were there, did she just call you up and say, hey, Jean-Pierre, save me the presidential suite?
As a matter of fact, she did. She didn't call me, but it's a very interesting story. And thank you for reminding me. When the hotel was under renovation, I was already there 20-something years ago. There was a huge scaffolding around the hotel, and we had placed a huge posting. Four Seasons Hotel Georges V, reopening December 1999. Please call us at, and the telephone number that was mentioned there was my assistant, Vincent. And all of a sudden, one afternoon, there was Vincent pick up the phone. Four Seasons Hotel Georges V, bonjour, Vincent à l'appareil, puis-je vous aider? And the guy on the other line was also a French speaker. He says, bonjour, je suis René Angéli. My name is René Angéli, and I'm interested to see the new hotel because Céline, who's next to me, Céline Dion, is going to be in Paris next year for a Tour de Chant show, and she might be interested in seeing one of your best suites. Honest to God, this is exactly the way Céline Dion became a regular guest at the Georges V.
And thanks to you in part. And how about these flowers here?
Well, the flowers are made by one of the most famous florists in the world. He's American, by the way. Some of them know him. He's from Los Angeles. Actually, he was born in Utah, but he lived most of his life in Los Angeles. He came on board in 1999 to help us opening the hotel, never left Paris. He now lives between New York and Paris. His name is Jeff Latham, and he became a real star. And he's the one who really gave the hotel its signature with the flowers. Now, of course, it's been imitated around the world, including Las Vegas. Well, the hotel, since its renovation, has been again and again maintained to the best standards. Here is a picture of the penthouse suites on the last floor of the hotel, one of my favorite, of course. And here is the decor that Madame Dupré, the niece of Venerietta singer, decided to change. She's the one who actually took all the beautiful carpets and the tapestries of the 18th century back into the hotel. And of course, the decor today has been rethought by our designer, the designer at that time. And it's as beautiful as probably Madame Dupré used to think about it when she was in charge of the hotel, and she was actually the owner.
Well, the Georges V, it's not especially known for its bar, I should say.
That's the reason why it was not mentioned to you.
the Georges V, but it is known for its gallery. This is the heart of the hotel where everything takes place. And this is a great place to go for high tea. And in fact, I have a wonderful experience. It was in 2008. I went for high tea there to interview one of my first interviews for France Revisited.
Uh-huh.
And I went, and it was a guy named Jean-Pierre Soutric. Can you imagine? There he was, 2008. This was my picture, so it's not the best picture, but this was my picture of our high tea at the time. And the title of the article was High Tea with JP at the George V. That was my great introduction to Jean-Pierre and the luxury world at the Georges V. So thank you, Jean-Pierre. And you haven't changed a bit.
No, not at all. Yeah, sure. Well, actually, now we have color pictures.
Yeah, right. Didn't have them back then. 1925. So this is shortly before the Georges V. There is a hotel that is built, as I say, that there are being many hotels that are being built at the time. And 1925 is the Hotel Raphael. Last, in part one, I mentioned the Hotel Regina, which was from 1900, belonging to the Bavarese family. And this is another hotel that still belongs to the Bavarese family, close to the Eiffel Tower. And its rooms are very, very
vintage,
I'd say. Yeah, vintage. And there is a fabulous view from at the restaurant bar up at the top, with one side looking towards the Arc de Triomphe and the other side facing the Eiffel Tower. Another hotel opened in 1925. Tell us about that, Jean-Pierre, and how. And I know that you know it intimately.
Yeah, of course. That was the last hotel I worked for. Actually, I worked for the collection that belongs, this hotel belonged to. Le Bristol opened in 1925 on the Faubourg Saint-Honoré, but it's only barely 10 minutes away from the Georges V. As you mentioned it very rightly, Gary, we are in the neighborhoods of the Champs-Élysées. The Faubourg Saint-Honoré is quite well known for one good reason, Madame de Pompadour, but also for Emmanuel Macron, because this is where our president lives, at number 55, the Palais de l'Élysée. Madame de Pompadour was one of the very first residents at the Palais de l'Élysée, at the Élysée Palace, in the 18th century. And most of you remember her because she was probably one of the prettiest women of their time, and also the official lover of the King Louis XV. Le Bristol on the Faubourg Saint-Honoré is surrounded by the most famous brands of Paris. Hermès is there. This is the home of Hermès when it all started, and the workshop is still located on the roof of the building. But other famous brands like Carita, the most famous hairdressers in the world, Baccarat, are all on the Faubourg Saint-Honoré. But the reason why I'd like to talk about this hotel is because it had a very interesting story in 1939 and 1941 until the Americans came at war. During the first part of the war, the Americans were not engaged. As you know, you will engage in December of 1941 after Pearl Harbor. And during that time, the hotel was not occupied by the German army in Paris, although the other hotels were. And the reason why is that because the owners, the Jamet family, had passed some sort of an agreement with the American embassy, so the hotel will become, so to speak, neutral. It was like a small Switzerland in the heart of Paris, where the people will come to drive their business, their diplomacy, etc. So a number of famous people will come to the hotel at that time before the Germans will be occupying the hotel eventually. One of them was Anne Morgan, the daughter of the famous J.P. Morgan. And Anne Morgan has been an incredible personage. Most of the people don't know that she had been very much involved in helping the French during the First World War. She had set up an association called the American Fund for the French Wounded. So in 1949, when again, France was at stake during the invasion of the Nazi to France, especially in 1940, she came back and had set another association called the American Friends of France, and she would help a number of families to escape the Nazi invasion, especially the Jewish family who were not feeling safe any longer in an occupied country.
And I'll be mentioning her during my World War I talks.
I'm back to the Jamet family. They are pictured in the center of this picture, and the young man in the middle will be the manager and the owner during the war. And Monsieur Jamet at that time had one of his employees, Leo Lerman. Leo Lerman was the architect and the designer of the hotel. He was Jewish, French Jewish. And Leo Lerman will be hidden by the Jamet family during the whole war. He's going to spend 4 years in the same room, room 106. And he will be occupied because he will be preparing for the reopening of the Bristol after the war. He will be designing the entire hotel again. And Leo Lerman will be saved by the family during that terrible time in France. Today, the hotel is owned by the Oetker family, which is actually a German family engaged in the food industry. And it's a collection of hotels that a lot of you know very well from being so famous. The Brenner's Park in Baden-Baden, the Lansborough in London, and one of the most famous one is probably the Hotel du Cap Eden Rock. And I will speak about it on our next episode.
That's right.
Moving on to something closer to our history is actually the reason why I picture here Jacques Chirac, Nicolas Sarkozy with some of the famous head of states, Monsieur Poutine, Madame Merkel, the French Republican Guard, is because being so close to the Élysée Palace, the Bristol has played a very important role in hosting this famous personage when they were coming for official visits. The only exception to the head of states not staying at the Bristol are the American visitors, because very close to the Élysée Palace is the residence of the ambassador of the USA. He has good taste, this man. The decor of the hotel today was inspired by actually the Comtesse Douglas, who is the heiress of the family Oetker. It's quite impeccable. It's very traditional French. We can see it from the restaurant of Monsieur Fréchon, a 3 Michelin star restaurant facing the gardens of the hotel. And when you look into the bedrooms, you'll see that the decor is extremely traditional, mostly inspired by French 18th century. It's a lovely hotel and it's got a very European feel.
And it's got a house cat, or a palace cat, you might say, named Pharaon. This is my photo of him to the left, and his official beauty shot is to the right. The Bristol bar is maybe a little too neutral for my taste. It's not one of my hangouts, even though I've had the pleasure of going there when Jean-Pierre was working there. Yeah. And I also had very interesting something happen. I can't tell you the whole story because if I do, I'd have to kill you. In that a mysterious man once contacted me and asked me to meet him at the bar. And he would not tell me on the phone what it was about. He said, meet me at the bar at 6 o'clock on Wednesday. And I went, and he was this fellow in his 70s, quite elegant, and he asked me a favor. And as I say, I can't repeat it to you, but what I want to tell you about this story is I had a moral dilemma at that time, and that is that he was drinking orange juice at 6 o'clock in the evening. And he said, when the bartender came, Gary, what would you like? And it was a very tough moment for me. Like, what do you choose when the person you're sitting with, who is some mysterious power fellow, is drinking orange juice? Now, my normal reaction would be to say that I would have like a whiskey, slightly peated whiskey. But I thought, well, should I have orange juice since he's having orange juice? Do I have to keep my wits about me? Anyway, I ended up having the whiskey. End of story, but I can't tell you the rest of it, what happened with them. I'll say one other thing about the Bristol is that as many of these hotels, they have excellent, knowledgeable, powerful concierges. And there's a concierge here named Stephanie who saved my life once, because I was once with clients of the hotel and I was about to take them out to tour some gardens. And just as we were leaving the hotel, the client said, oh, by the way, we want to have lunch at 12:30 at such and such a place, which I knew was impossible to get a last minute reservation. So I ran over to Stephanie and I said, Stephanie, I'm about to go out and visit some gardens. Can you get me a reservation? And you know, Stephanie did it. So she saved my life, and it was seamless. We just showed up at the door of the restaurant. There was our table.
Yeah, you're too polite to say, but she saved your ass.
Yeah. Although I don't tell people, I tell people that I did it. It's obvious in me. But
all right, let's move further west. That will be our last stop today until we spoke about the future of the Palace Hotels in Paris. We're going to start with the Plaine Monceau. The Plaine Monceau is a neighborhood of Paris, very well known, as mentioned by Gary, close to the Parc Monceau. Why is it famous? Because it's home to the most incredible houses and buildings of Paris. Here is a good example. It's a very posh neighborhood. La Plaine Monceau was home of the most, the richest families of Paris. You have an example here, and the next picture is showing you one of the interiors. And it's actually the famous Musée Nissim de Camondo. It's a museum today, but in the 19th century, it was the home of the Camondo family. They were bankers. They had established in Paris in the 19th century and made aristocrats by Napoleon III. And it's a beautiful museum. I like to recommend it because it's never crowded, and it's showing you how the people used to live in that time. Closer to us today, you would see, if you were lucky, you will meet some of the most famous socialites of Paris. One of them is on the next slide, is my favorite one. Her name is Jacqueline de Ribes. She's a Vicomtesse. She's very famous in the USA because in the 1960s, she was named by Harper's Bazaar the most stylish woman in the world. Today, she's probably 92 years old. I doubt she will dress with the same dress, but she's as slim and as elegant and beautiful and smart as she used to be in that time.
Jean-Pierre, you know everyone. It's incredible.
Yes. But in the 1920s, very close to Jacqueline's de Ribes Hôtel Particulier, the Hotel Royal Monceau will open its door. It's quite a very sleek, not very sleek, but quite a simple, elegant facade on the Avenue Hoche, very close to the Arc de Triomphe. And again, that hotel was painstakingly renovated over the past years. It's a hotel where history took place also. A few months before the independence or the creation of the State of Israel in May of 1948, Golda Meir, she was not yet the prime minister, and David Ben-Gurion, who was to become the first prime minister of Israel, were met in Paris by the officials of the United Nations to prepare for the independence of the state, and they met at the Royal Monceau. A few years after, when France is going to lose its colony in Indochina, Ho Chi Minh will come to Paris and will stay at this hotel again to prepare for the talk of the independence of Indochina and the creation of the state of Vietnam. The Hotel Royal Monceau is associated to the Raffles brand. Here is the picture of the famous Raffles in Singapore. And it's been entirely restored. It was not as beautiful as you can see from this picture. The designer is Philip Stark, is quite well known in the USA. Philip Stark is not the usual designer. The bedrooms are quite a bit special. They're not the classic French design. We see that on the next picture, Gary. Some people say it's quite a sexy hotel. It's not only because that guest obviously doesn't know that the bed is very comfortable too. But the hotel is extremely well known also because of its spa and its pool. And it's got all the comfort of the 21st century. And it's on the next picture, Gary. I know you're interested in looking at this young woman sitting on the floor. That's a view of the beautiful pool of the Royal Monceau. We're going to leave the Avenue Hoche and the Royal Monceau all the way up to the Arc de Triomphe. And you may think, why is that? Because we've seen most of the Palace Hotels. We have indeed seen all the Palace Hotels who have never closed during this time, with the exception of this awful COVID pandemic. And we're going to go and evoke the new Palace Hotels that were actually built already, but not necessarily as what they are today. The first one to us is the Peninsula, which opened officially in 2014. But that hotel was already in business at the turn of the Belle Epoque in 1904 and known as the Majestic. It will remain a hotel until the Second World War. And after the war, it will be actually confiscated by the French authorities from the owners to become a conference center. On this picture, Gary is showing us the Shangri-La, which opened in 2010. The Shangri-La was the official home of Prince Roland Bonaparte, the great grandnephew of Napoleon I, the first emperor of France. He was a very rich man, obviously, but not because he was a Bonaparte, but he had married one of the richest heiress of France. She was Madame Blanc, Marie Blanc. She was actually the heiress of the casinos and the hotels in Monte Carlo.
And it has a nice bar.
Would you believe?
The Shangri-La.
The next picture is showing you a rather modern building, the Mandarin Oriental. It looks modern to this picture, but funny enough, it's one of the oldest streets of France, because this street was actually set by the Romans when France was not even France. It was called Gaul, and the building itself is set on an Art Deco facade, but inside it's quite modern. But it's a fabulous location if you are a shopping lovers, and as well as somebody interested in art, as many art galleries are surrounding the hotel.
And Jean-Pierre, you think that I only go to these places for the bars, but I also go for the tea and the pastries. And because in addition to enjoying meeting bartenders, I also meet pastry chefs. And here is a great one, Adrien Bozolo, who's the pastry chef at the Mandarin Oriental. And the chef of the great restaurant at the Mandarin is Thierry Marx. And going there in the afternoon for one of Adrien's creations is a magnificent event. In fact, I prefer it more as an afternoon event than to go in the evening for a drink at this place. And it's on Rue Saint-Honoré, and Saint-Honoré is the patron saint of bakers and pastry chefs. And so if you are a pastry chef working on Rue Saint-Honoré, you have to make your special creation Saint-Honoré. So this is a picture of his Saint-Honoré revisited. And he's a lovely person.
Indeed.
Adrien Bozolo.
We're going to make another few stops for the new hotels to open very soon. Cheval Blanc, it's the brand of the Louis Vuitton group, is opening up in probably in May or June, probably in June. They're waiting for the borders to reopen so Americans can fly in and the Europeans can also visit. Actually, the Europeans can visit again from today on, and Americans this summer. La Samaritaine was actually a department store built in the 1920s. Before that, but that building is built in 1920s in pure Art Deco style. It's facing the Seine River and will boast beautiful views overlooking the Seine River all the way to the Eiffel Tower. And most of the rooms will be actually facing the River Seine. This one is actually opposite my favorite hotel, the Georges V, is actually the Bulgari. The Bulgari is probably not a very historic building. It was actually a bank before. But inside, no doubt that the Bulgari brand will bring this hotel to the highest standards. His name, as you probably know, after the famous Roman jewelry designer. And the hotel is also due to open anytime between now and the beginning of the summer. We make a last stop, not in Paris this time. You have all recognized the beautiful Chateau de Versailles. Even the Sun King will have finally a hotel in front of his chateau. It's going to be called the Grand Contrôle. And the Grand Contrôle will boast the stunning views overlooking the chateau and the gardens, and is due to open very soon under the guidance of the famous chef, Alain Ducasse. And as you probably see, the palace story in Paris never ends.
But Jean-Pierre, with all of these recent and then three new ones opening up, is there enough of a luxury market for all of this?
Hopefully there will be enough. The market is actually went to a stop, as you probably know, during this pandemic, but these hotels were already under construction. So hopefully there will be a period of time where Paris, like most of the cities in the world, will have to go through an in-between period. But I have no doubt about the future of tourism in Europe. And the reason why these hotels will be successful is because they really bring Paris inside the hotels and vice versa. They will bring a little bit of Versailles and Paris inside the hotels. So no doubt that that will be part of the experience in the future. And I'm pretty sure that, you know, when you've been to Paris once, you're not going to think, I've done it, I'm good. You want to come back. So probably these hotels will have a success in the future. And hopefully very soon, as I mentioned to you, the President Macron has already announced that American visitors will be able to enter France from this summer, as long as they bear a sanitary passport showing that they've been vaccinated.
Speaking of the future, we have Notre Dame to look forward to opening in a few years. We have the Olympics coming in 2024. So Paris has a bright future.
Yeah, this is actually the way I like to end this presentation, because Notre Dame, as you probably is the protection, is protecting Paris, is protecting France, and it's probably is big enough to protect the entire world. And when it went on fire 2 years ago, I saw this incredible élan de solidarity, this solidarity wave coming from across the world. And I think Americans were not the last to really contribute to the renovation of Notre Dame. So it will be ready for the Olympic Games in 2024. And if you pass by Paris, this is actually a picture taken away just a few weeks before we prepared this presentation to you all. Notre Dame is still standing, and it's the most important symbol of our civilization. So with Gary and I, we only wish that we have a chance to really meet you behind Notre Dame on the Pont de l'Archevêché, when we can toast to the future and the bright future of our lives.
Jean-Pierre, as I asked you last time, other than the Georges V, where can I take you for a drink? In which of these hotels?
All right, let's go to the new ones. Okay, why don't we meet at the Cheval Blanc?
Cheval Blanc, well, yeah, because I don't know it yet, so I'd be happy to go at the Samaritain. Yeah.
But in the meantime, we can sit at a beautiful terrace in a cafe from tomorrow.
That's right. Looking forward to that. How about, are you a cigar smoker? Because the Royal Monceau has a cigar bar.
I am not.
Oh, okay.
No, but I drink wine.
You drink wine. I know you do. So we'll meet at one of them. We'll meet at several of them.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, and looking forward to seeing everyone in Paris.